Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Money in the Law on My FM 101.3 WMRC First Class Radio with your host, Jay Marsden from the Marsden Law Group and John Drohan from Main Effort Financial. We are also joined by the Holliston Cable Access Television, Christian Bidet, the senior and probably the only cameraman that ever comes here anymore.
He's like a war. Is his title also a war correspondent?
He is the official war correspondent
of HCAT
for
nice.
Holliston Cable Access. He's the sports correspondent.
Nice,
as Christian and I remember last spring, we did a softball game together, right?
Nice.
That's
there
right.
you go.
Christian and I, Christian's everywhere.
Arts and Entertainment, also Arts and Entertainment.
He does, right? Yeah. He does, right? He has like the Dirty on the 30 or whatever it is, right?
That's right. Well, there's a lot of play reviews, a lot of theater reviews.
Theater review. What about movie reviews? That's what I want to do today. I have a movie to review today.
All right, we'll
so
talk
Christian
about
can join us about that.
Nice.
How are you?
Doing well, doing great. It was funny this week. A great week for all you New England Patriots fans.
No.
Which I mean,
Make
somebody calls me up Monday morning and they said, "Geez, Jay, I don't live in New England, but I'm outside of New England. How's everything up in Boston today?" I said, "Stop right there." I said, "Do we have enough time?" I said, "Because first of all, the Patriots, in case you hadn't heard, they won the Super Bowl yesterday." I said, "And it's 65 degrees in February."
Yeah.
I said, "So we're like 2 for 2. How much better does it get at that point?"
Do we have to talk about the Super Bowl? Okay, I will. Can I just tell you right now, listen, just a quick sports review.
Oh, please.
I mean, and of course, Jay, who's now all of a sudden is like a giant, Patriots fan. Oh, I love him.
Yep.
That's my team. That's my team.
Yep,
so, all right, I'm not knocking the Patriots. They are without a doubt the greatest football franchise in the history of the NFL. There's no
an
argument.
aggressive statement right
there.
Okay.
No argument. I mean, you can't.
Some folks in Pittsburgh may disagree with that. Some folks in Chicago may have something to say about that.
Chicago, nothing. I mean,
All right.
Chicago maybe when our grandfathers are watching football. So the Patriots are they have that. That being and of course and up until Sunday's game, it was every Super Bowl that the Brady and Belichick had played in. They weren't good games. They were great games, regardless of whether you were a Patriots fan or whomever you liked. There was great,
from an entertainment factor,
crazy football. So then comes this Sunday, right?
Oh yeah.
And here we are. So from a football purist standpoint, it wasn't bad. I mean, you had like some good defense, you had some good plays. It was all that.
It was a pitcher's duel.
Blah, yeah, right. It was a National League. You know what it was? It was a National League pitcher's duel. Yawn 2-1 game, right? I mean, we've had better scores than like old man softball in 13-3. Anyway, so that's fine. Whatever. The game was a yawner and it was boring and whatever. The Rams, they suck. They did. They didn't show up.
That's John Drohan, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I said it. You heard me say it.
Go ahead.
But the worst part about the Super Bowl was the halftime show. I mean, make it go away. And I'm going on record to say this. Whatever. I'm sure maybe he's a nice guy. I don't know him personally, but as an entertainer, Maroon 5 and in particular Adam Levine, awful.
I gotta. You know what? You and I, we agree in most cases. We definitely agree in this case.
Oh my God.
Because I'm not sure I understand the draw. I'm not, I love music. We talked about it. I love music, right?
You are a music purist.
I love it.
Right. And you love all kinds of music.
Yes.
In your defense, it's not like you're picky in one way. You will listen to all kinds of music, so good for you.
Yep. But I got to tell you, I completely agree with you. It may be time to maybe just put the Super Bowl halftime show to bed. I just...
Right.
I mean,
can you imagine? I can't imagine the cost and the manpower to put that thing in operation.
the buildup is ridiculous.
Yep.
And then rarely, if ever, does it live up to its expectations. I will tell you, I think of this every year when it's the halftime show. Do you remember the legendary comedy show In Living Color?
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
One of the most funny skit shows that you ever saw. I think it was a half hour long, and you fell out of your chair.
It was the birth of Jim Carrey.
Yep, birth of Jim Carrey, birth of Jamie Foxx,
Yep.
birth of a lot of great entertainers that came out of that. So I remember one year that they basically said, we're going to do a show that's the length of the Super Bowl halftime show. And their show had a clock running in the corner during that whole segment. So you knew exactly when it was over. You could flip back to the Super Bowl. You weren't going to miss a thing. And I think that there's an opportunity to capitalize on that from other areas of the industry to say, look, we have to give you another alternative. Because what I was going to suggest, friends of ours have YouTube TV, and I was going to suggest, let's not watch this halftime show.
Watch Prince.
Let's pick another one. Let's pick U2. Let's pick a better halftime show, and that would have been a better I think that would have been a better option. So I agree with that.
But then there's the curiosity factor that it would be very hard to turn it off because you're like, all right, well, maybe they're gonna right.
Maybe something's going to happen.
Well, in this case, it was a train wreck.
Let's see who shows up. Let's see who they dust off and bring out.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So there you go. So you're watching this show, and it's bad. And I was funny. So I was so upset about it the next day. I'm looking on the internet, and they were like saying how like they was getting crushed on Twitter and everything. One of the best lines I heard was I felt like I was listening to the to a Chili's like mixtape, you know, like right. I felt like Adam Levine. I felt like Adam Levine was a pop star created at Target, you know, it was terrible. So anyway, so he does his thing, he takes his shirt off. You're like, really, dude? Like, why are you doing this? You know, like make it stop. And then the Maroon 5 songs. I mean, again, I'm sure there's people that love Maroon 5, and they're talented musicians. I'm not saying they're not, but it's so vanilla.
It's a struggle.
So I'm watching it, and I'm chirping during this whole thing, and then he plays the song "Moves Like Jagger," and he's got his shirt off, and I'm like, okay, I can't. I'm trying not to watch this, but then "Moves Like Jagger" comes on, and I'm like, okay. You know what? You know what's going to happen right now? This is how they're going to salvage this. Mick Jagger's going to come
Absolutely.
out. And I'm like, and I'm waiting. I'm like, where is he? Here he comes. Like he's going to dance to this song that's written about him.
Yep, you're waiting for a couple of Rolling Stones songs to save the set. This is going to be great.
I'm waiting for Keith Richards to walk out first, and then Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
And nothing.
And you know what's funny?
Crickets.
You know what's funny? I'm not in that business, okay? I don't do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But that could not be a more
it's
obvious softball
right.
to say, hey, here's what we're going to do.
Easy.
Hey, Adam, I know you're good, and that's great. But guess what? We have the chance to fly in basically rock and roll royalty, and you're going to get out of the way a little bit. You can do whatever you need.
You
do a
way
little
out of the way.
dancing or whatever.
Yeah.
That's fine. But, you know, we're going to turn it over at this point to the guy who has forgotten more about being a rock and roll star for all the obvious chemically induced reasons, and you'll just get out of the way. Let him do his thing.
That and the reasons in that he's 75 or 76 years old.
Yeah, and he's got more energy than you and me and everybody in this room. And I mean, you know, that would have been.
It would have saved
it. I can envision it right now where he finishes his "Moves Like Jagger" line, and in the background, all you hear
he's dancing.
He's dancing around, and all you hear is pick any awesome Stone song.
Yep,
and you just hear the beginning of the riff, right? Anything, right? That's right. Anything. The crowd would have gone.
They would have lost it.
That would have saved it. That's a great point.
It wouldn't have saved it. It would have made it, and then you'd have remembered that show, that halftime show, and then you and I wouldn't be sitting there. Hey, go to YouTube TV and go to another.
Look up 20-year-old halftime shows, right?
No, you'd be like, yeah, there we go.
Well, what you would have said was you would have skipped over the first part. You would have been like, and then when Jagger came out, who was on before him? No idea.
Yeah.
But then Jagger came out, and that's right.
Exactly. And then you know what? And then people, and at least if he didn't take his shirt off, and then people would have been like, Maroon 5, they're all right, right?
Yeah.
Like he teed him
That's
up,
right. That's
He teed up the Rolling Stones.
Opening act for the Stones.
Did a great
idea.
job.
Great for your resume.
Open for the Stones.
Yep. Great for your resume.
You know what?
Right.
Keep going. You know what? You guys are pretty good. I like that. That song's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
You guys knew. You knew. Yeah. It's great. It's great. It's great. You guys playing DCU Center? That's right. We got it.
Yeah.
So.
I'll go to Providence. Right.
See you at Lupo's. You can be a blast. Great. Ticket to the door.
All right. So anyway, all right. So congratulations to the Patriots, 6th Super Bowl. Blah blah blah. You won it. And you're probably favored for next year's Super Bowl too, just because everybody's going to be coming back.
Best line of the week. They ought to call the Super Bowl the New England Invitational.
That's right. That's right.
They just send a letter out to a couple of people in the NFC. Hey, you want to play ball this year?
I heard the statistic that if you were 17 years old right now, you would have, in living in the greater Boston area, you would have watched, let's see, 3 Red Sox World Series, 6 New England Patriots Super Bowl wins.
How many AFC championships?
Well, no, I'm just saying champions. Like team, and then the Bruins in 11 and the Celtics in 2008.
Yep.
So yeah, whatever. Count those up. That's a lot.
Do the math. A lot of math.
Right. And then you're like, right. It's like being Derek Jeter. Like when Derek Jeter, when he was playing for the Yankees, like, of course I'm going to be playing in October. Of course, we're going to the World Series.
Yeah, I made no travel plans until November.
Yeah,
made no travel plans
do.
until November. Did you ever see the commercial? And then we'll jump on to what our topic of the day is.
No, we
Did
don't have to.
Did you ever see the commercial? They always play it during March Madness. Gino Auriemma walking into a store and he's trying to put his car keys in his pockets because he's got all the rings on because he's got like 11 championships. He's trying to put it in. Oh, absolutely hysterical, right? And that's the thing with Brady. Now he's got to go to two hands, right? It's not Bill Russell.
No.
That's the best pitcher ever. But
nor is he Bill Belichick. So Bill Belichick has 8 Super Bowl rings. Do you know why?
Do tell.
Because Bill Belichick was the defensive coordinator for my
your boys,
New York Football Giants.
That's what I thought you were
going to
say.
In 1986 and 1990, those 2 Super Bowl rings, which is the ones that he actually earned. The other ones are just
the other ones he jumped on Brady's shoulders.
They were teed up by Tom Brady. Yeah.
All right, good stuff. Let's go to a quick break. What do you want to talk about? A quick break, and then we'll go back.
I want to talk about my things. I want to talk about my stuff and who's going to get it.
All right, we're going to talk about personal. We always talk about probate from an assets perspective. We always talk about bank accounts. We always talk about the sexy stuff. Today we're going to talk about the not so sexy stuff that can potentially
Although
cause.
It could be
sexy.
It could be, yeah.
Depending on what's in the drawers, but that's right. But it could be something that you transfer over to people, and what the best way to do it, and how these things work, and how do you avoid the rock fight at Thanksgiving Day table, and to figure this out.
It's just plain thievery. It's going to be fun. We're going to do some skits, I think, with
thievery.
it too.
John's brought a bunch of his stuff in from the house. We're gonna talk about who's going to get it when he goes.
My water bottle.
Write all this stuff down. So we'll talk about that when we get back from our break.
We will be right back on My FM 101.3 WMRC First Class Radio. Money, I'm money and the law. There's my legal friend.
That's right. That's
we will be right back.
And you're back. Money, the law, My FM 101.3.
Yeah.
He's John Drohan, Main Effort Financial. I am Jay Marsden, Marsden Law Group. Christian is at the helm, keeping us pointed on a course due south this time of the year. That's where we like to go when it gets cold. We like to head down to the little latitudes, as we call it, and stay warm down there. So that's where we should try to get Tom to pay for one of those shows, or we do it from way down, like right from Duval Street, right in like the window of a.
It could stream live on on the media center.
Yeah, Christian can drive us around all weekend. It's a great idea, great opportunity for him to see.
Because he likes to drive, right? We could rent one of those, those like mini buses, right?
You could experience middle age firsthand. What happens when you cut loose a couple of people away from their family for 3 days?
Yeah, this would be so much fun for you, Christian.
What a win!
Everybody.
So right at the break,
I'm not going McAuliffe though. No way, McAuliffe. No, McAuliffe.
I need to work out before we go.
Oh, God.
He's a pro.
And then would Ray come? And then if Ray came too,
Ray's welcome.
Well, Ray's of course he's welcome, and Tom's welcome too as long as he's paying. But Ray, Ray. I think Ray's a pro too.
Yeah.
So because Ray works at night. I mean, he's a rock star. Yeah, he's a rock star, right? He'd laugh at us. You and I'd be yawning.
He's just warming up about midnight, right?
That's right.
He's just kind of putting it into second gear, right?
That's right. He's in second gear once the clock hits 12.
So funny.
All right, so let's talk about your stuff.
So we're talking about probate of your stuff, and let me tell you why we're talking about this. This comes up all the time with clients, right? They come in the office, and we're always talking about, we're gonna make sure we figure out what happens with your real estate. We're gonna talk about those brokerage accounts, and we got to talk about your IRA
the
account,
big stuff.
Right? The big stuff. I mean, that's what everybody thinks about, right? And then at some point, it usually comes up in the conversation, and it comes up a fair amount. Somebody says, Jay, that's great, but what about this, right? And they're always talking about very personal items, things that are smaller in nature, things that are, in many cases, more often than not, sentimental in nature. There might not be a substantial value, putting aside the fact that, jewelry, diamonds, things like that, you can run
let me back you up. Just so what about but there are some things that could have some significant value, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's some things like cars, for instance, right?
Yep.
So cars fall into this category, right? Because there's no, if it's not specified in the will or specified in any of the documentation, it's kind of like that's how it works, right? All your stuff kind of goes into that bucket, and it's usually it's kind of a catch-all. My personal effects are left to X, unless it's specified, right?
Unless it's specified. So what we generally try to do is we try to counsel people that if you have personal items that you want to leave to people, a lot of people want to write them in the will, right? A lot of people want to say, look, I want to leave, I want to leave the hope chest to cousin, Blanche, who's down in so-and-so, North Carolina, or I want something to go to my cousin up in Canada because, this is just something that their side of the family would really appreciate. So here's the challenge. The challenge is when you put those personal items and you lay them out in your will, now what you've done, not good, not bad, but what you've done is you have now invited those people in as a person of interest in your estate, okay? And so those people now have to be given notice of everything that's going on, okay? Now,
but why is that a problem?
Well, it can be good and it can be bad. Where it's a problem is, in many cases, you're taking something, you're making a already bureaucratic process more bureaucratic.
You're inviting more people to the party.
You're inviting more people to the party. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be at the party. I'm just saying maybe they shouldn't sit at the head table, okay? What I'm saying is that you may want to do something like this, but if you leave it to them, first of all, through your will is a public document. Once you file that in probate, everybody sees who gets Nana's brooch or Auntie Susan's diamond rings or whatever that looks like, okay? And now these people all have to, you in some cases you might double or triple the amount of work you have to do because they have to all get notice. They may have to assent to certain things that really their interest isn't much beyond whatever that personal item is, but you've now invited them into the tent. And that can create some problems.
Well, it could, like you said, just by virtue of the fact that there's more mouths to feed at the, at the luncheon, it's going to drag it out. It could drag it out more, and then if people start asking questions and people start, participating, I guess, more than if they were not there, it could make this longer. I guess the real issue is, so if I have the, here's my personal effects and they've been itemized, for lack of a better term, to say, okay, everybody's getting X, Y, and Z, and there's people that aren't on the, on the inner circle for this, that's when it could cause a problem. So what about if people who are on, so let's say, I want to, if I'm leaving things to like my, other than my children, like, maybe like my brother or my sister or something like that, they're probably on the inner circle. It's probably when you go outside of that is when it can really turn into.
Yes and no. I mean, you know from being a member of a family, right? People have different dynamics and people respond to things differently. And so, even if you go outside the circle, yes, anytime you go, to the outer edges of the circle and you're inviting people in, that potentially creates a problem. But the way that we try to structure these deals for people is we try to make sure that if our advice to clients is always try to avoid probate as best we can, right? And if we have to go to probate, let's make that process as streamlined as possible, right? And remember, if you're leaving personal items to people, the question starts to become, what's the relationship like? Can we find those people? If I got to chase somebody down to leave somebody's rocking chair to them, that's work, right? That's work. And in many cases, the estate will say something along the lines of, and the packing up and the reasonable expenses associated with getting this property to that person will be borne by the estate, right?
Sure.
So not only are you leaving the hope chest to Auntie
you're
Sally,
leaving the shipping costs.
You're leaving the shipping costs, you're leaving the gallows moving costs, all that stuff. That's all got to go down. That's all got to get taken care of that way. So that can be also equally challenging. That can be, again, depending if it's a somewhat modest estate, those are real expenses that have to be borne by somebody.
It can be frustrating, right?
And that person, I hate to say it, they might not want it, right? But there's an obligation, right? Yeah. It's in the will, and unless you want to jump through extra hoops where they disclaim that interest in the estate,
that's what they have to do, right? They need to disclaim it. They need to file with the probate court and say they don't
formally say I want no part of this.
I don't want that 52 carat diamond ring. I just don't want it. I have no need for it.
I can't fit my gloves over it.
Nothing I can do it. Yeah.
Can't fit my gloves over it.
Nothing I can do with it.
I don't want it. So that can be a challenge. So, and because most of the work that we do when we do work for people, we do what's called a pour over will. All our pour over will says is, I leave everything to my trust. That's it, right? Mm-hmm. And here's who my here's who my executors are, and their job is to give everything to the trust. And then that way,
that's the end of probate.
Well, that's the end of what people see from the outside as far as probate goes, because all your will says is leave it to the trust. You fill the paperwork out, you deposit everything, but nobody knows what the trust says. Mm-hmm. Now, in our trust document for these type of personal items, we always, always, always encourage our clients. If there is some item of sentimental value, and I always describe it as it's the stuff that somebody could pick up and walk out the door with, right? Could be a mirror, could be a hope chest, could be jewelry, could be. Believe me, let me tell you, I've had some knockdown. I've had some knockdown, drag out battles over a mirror that you wouldn't believe. That I think to myself, really, this is all about the mirror?
Yeah.
Huh? Oh yeah, this is all because again, to you it's a mirror.
Yeah.
To somebody else, it's a story.
Yeah.
It's a story that has another story that leads into another story that has some emotional value. And I'm telling you, the emotional value in many cases is worth well more than the actual monetary value.
And I can think of things like right now. So there's in my own situation, we have this old Victrola record player. This plays 78s, right? And right now there is a battle between my sister and I because I'm just assuming that that's mine. Right now it's in my mom's basement. No one's using it. I think I probably should go pick that up right now.
Before anybody
anyway,
knows. Yep,
right?
while she's away.
And my sister's like, oh no. Don't you understand? That's mine. And my brother and my other sister, they're indifferent on it. But it's those kind of things where how do I rectify that?
So there's a couple of ways to do it. So the best way to do it is if mom says, while everybody's around and mom knows, John, I want you to have the Victrola.
Yes.
Come on down and
Hold
get
on,
the Victrola.
Let's say it one more time. I'm going to video this right now.
John,
okay, yeah.
I want you, Janet, listen, Janet. John, I want you to have the Victrola, okay? Come on down and get it. And then when your sister says, have the Victrola, your mother can say, I gave it to John.
And I can send her the video.
I know he has a thing for, he's jitterbugging all over the place up in Holliston in those 78s. And, he's got Haley's dressed up as a flapper and they're doing their thing, right? So that's one option. And that takes care of it, right? That way everybody knows who was supposed to get the gift.
That's the easy way.
Right? That's the easy way. Now, the other way, depending on how creative people want to get, some people will go the old-fashioned sticky route, right?
Yes.
They bust out the box of stickies. You happen to swing through mom's house one day, and she's got yellow stickies, orange stickies. Sometimes it's color-coded, and you know who's who.
Those stickies come right off.
They pull those things right out. So you go, I want, John, orange sticky on the Victrola.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at my board here, color-coded orange, that's you. So you get that. You get all the other stuff, right? That's all great. Now that works. That works, all right? But to your point, that only works until somebody doesn't realize that mom's losing her fastball a little bit, and your sisters are over there trading stickies like trading cards, right? Moving those around.
Four stickies on one thing.
John, that sticky that was on the Victrola, it looks like mom moved it to the ashtray.
And that's a little, that's an ominous thing to do, right? Okay, we're going to start putting stickies. Whoa, like what's going on? Are you not feeling okay, right?
Somebody at the finish line here? Something you're not telling me? That's right.
So,
that's right.
And then it'll usually blow it up. You'll be like, I don't want any part of this. It's not worth it to me. It's really kind of after, like so post. The post-mortem, here we are, so we're in the trust or we're in a will or wherever, and we have all this stuff. We have all this stuff, right? Yeah. And there, like you said, there's going to be things that have extreme sentimental value. And, at the end of the day, there's going to be, you're going to have to horse trade, and you're going to have to say, okay, look, how much do you really want this? How much do you really want this? And there'll be some things like, I definitely want that. I'm going to go to the mat on that, right? And I'm sure that that's a very common thing.
Well, and depending on the players, right? Everybody gets along. They say, look, you know what? That's fine, Johnny. You want that? I get it. I'm not going to, because I recognize there's going to be something I'm going to want. And you're going to pull the brakes. You're going to pull your foot off the gas a little bit and give me that. So yes, if it's a reasonable people, you're in good shape.
But I think the problem you run into, and you can attest to this probably better than anybody, is that, so what if it's like, okay, you know what, I really like that chair. That chair is the chair that my dad sat in, for 50 years when he was at the fire department. I want that chair more than anything. And that chair is worth about $37.
Yep.
Right? And then you're like, my brother would be like, okay, great, that's right. All right, you see that that video camera collection that mom just bought last year because she wanted to go into rap music video production.
Right.
And that's worth about $37,000. You get that, and I get that. Deal, right? And when things have like a significant monetary value differential, that's when you can be like, okay, whoa, how is that fair?
Well, then the conversation
and
around
that's when there could be, that could be like, all right, no, that's not fair.
Well,
right?
there could be absolutely no issue, right? To your point, you laugh about it. You say, well, look, this chair that Dad sat in has real emotional value for me. I don't care about the video camera setup, right? And if you're really into that, and that's what floats your boat, and that's how you really feel like that's your memory of mom, then that's where we go. So you take that, and I'll take the chair, and I don't care that the numbers square up because it doesn't matter to me, right? The numbers in my head emotionally, the numbers square up, and I'm fine with it. But what we always counsel people to do is to say, look, here's what's going to happen. If you do absolutely nothing, the language in your will says something like, for our trust clients, when we do a trust or a simple will, the language says something like, I will leave a personal memo to guide my executor about these personal items, right? And it's a personal memo, and everybody gets caught up in this. All it means is you sit down and you, as a person, write a memo. That's it. That's all it is. It's
I do it as a person as opposed to a robot
not in any other capacity.
Some kind of
It's a personal memo, and it says
a unicorn.
It says something like, "Dear kids, if something ever happens to me, here's what I want to happen to my personal effects," and it lists it out. John gets the Victrola, right? Somebody else gets the camera. Somebody else gets Dad's chair, right? If you do that, right, then you just slide that in your personal papers and you leave it there. And the reason you do that is because if you put it in the will, we talked about the idea of having it be public and all this stuff, but then families being family, something happens, right?
Yeah.
You're over the house, it's Thanksgiving, and your mother says to you, John, I hope you're enjoying that chair. I hope you're enjoying that chair.
Let me get my paper out.
Because guess what? That chair's coming to you, John. It looks really good on you. And you say, this chair? Every time I sit in this chair, my back hurts for 3 days. I can't stand this chair. I hate this chair.
But of course you take it. You don't say that,
no.
right?
You don't say that. You say it a little bit nicely.
You say,
but you say, look,
you say, I want something else.
Your mom just gets wind of it, right?
Yeah.
I know you don't want the chair, or I don't that piece of jewelry. Right? Little kids, right? You say to you say to the grandkids, Nana's going to give you this, and kids tell the truth all the time.
Yeah.
That ugly thing, I don't want that. I'd never wear that, right? So Nana gets offended. So what happens is now, if there's a need for changing, or she gets rid of stuff, or whatever it is, if there's a need to change stuff up, you bust out your personal memo, you tear it up, and you write up a new one. And that avoids having to call the lawyer, get everybody back in a room, get all the witnesses together, and then signing more stuff.
So how is that different? Again, this is an ignorant legal question.
Yeah.
So how is that different? How is that property different from the property, like say, the $40,000 CD? How is that different?
Well, it's different because it's personal property. It's not considered assets. It's not considered real property. So it's defined as personal property. And the language in your will or in your trust that says, if I leave a personal memorandum, that language is what we call incorporation by reference. And what that means is you've specifically called out this memo as, if it exists, it's to be worked in or considered as part of my will or of my trust. And that's how it works for those personal items. You could certainly say in your will, I leave my $40,000 CD at Middlesex Savings Bank to John, right? Yeah. You could do that. And if that account is in just your name at your death, then that account would go, according to your probate estate, according to your will, to John. But if that CD has your sister's name on it, it's not part of the probate estate, goes right to your sister, and you are SOL with the legal term. We use that a lot, and that's what happens to you. But
so out of.
But this idea of this memo, and then we'll take a quick break in a couple of minutes. But the idea of this memo is critically important if you have important, specific wishes over personal items. And again, you could put them in your will if you want to. We discourage you from putting them in your will because it's easier to do it this way. If you want to put them in your will, we will put them in your will. But the idea is this is a better way to do it.
One too many wills.
Too many wills in
that sentence.
This is a better way to do it because it allows for a little more flexibility. It allows for changes in circumstances where you may make a gift of those things. You may have initially promised the Victrola to you, and then your mother says, he doesn't really care about it. I've seen him dance. The last thing I want to do is encourage that. So let's give it to somebody else, and that's fine, and it takes care of that situation.
When we come back from our break, I have so many questions for my lawyer right now.
All right.
And you should listen to your lawyer's advice. Okay, we will be right back on My FM 101.3. WMRC First Class Radio, Money in the Law, your favorite show. It's every Saturday morning with Jay Morrison.
Best show on the radio.
Yeah, arguably one of the best. I listened to it this past Saturday.
Of course you did.
It was fantastic. We'll be right back after this short break.
And we're back. Money in the Law, My FM 101.3, My FM. He's John Drohan, manager for financial. I'm Jay Marsden, Marsden Law Center. Christian at the wheel.
Wait, is it a law center now?
Did I say center?
You sure did.
Oh, margin, my bad. Margin-in-law agreement. Should I be a center? I should be a center. I got to think about that.
I think you're onto something. Lost center,
write that
right?
down. Somebody write that down.
I feel like whenever I was fortunate enough. I always, it's such a pleasure and it's such an honor to be able to go and witness some of Jay's signing documents. And it's usually I get plenty of leeway. It's 9:22 and I get a text. Hey, can you witness some documents signings at 9:30? You bet, no problem. I'm not doing anything, right?
Well, let me explain that. So, of course, expecting a full house this week, right? Pats win the Super Bowl, then they have the Duck Boat Parade, and it just happens to be 65 out, and it was like a ghost town over there, right?
Yeah,
so chasing down witnesses at the law center can sometimes be a challenging.
You think so, right? You think that place would be crawling with lawyers and legal aids and paralegals,
we're working
right?
on that. We might be adding some body. Might be adding some body count.
847 Washington Street, Law Center.
That's right. That's right. Come on down. Come on down. So we're talking before the break about personal items, talking about memos, talking about how to best pass those things. Now, I'm going to say, and we have said this on this show before about planning in these situations, that makes this a critical element of success. Second marriages, third marriages, fourth marriages, whatever it looks like. You bring relationships together after the initial game. Now, these ideas of who gets what out of whose personal items, these can get thorny really fast, okay? And the reason is because unless everybody's on the same page and everybody's pulling the rope in the same direction, what's going to happen is there's going to be some blood on the floor, right?
Well, that brings my question. So my question is, when we talk about defining personal property versus real property and assets, so personal property, there's personal property that can have some significant financial, that could be worth some stuff. So it's one thing if I'm saying, I want Dad's baseball glove. It's another thing if I want Dad's baseball glove that was autographed by Mickey Mantle.
Yes.
Right? So those are two different things. There's one that's worth $11 and there's one that's worth $1,100 or $11,000.
Yeah. Well, you run into this a lot with things like artwork, right? So, my dog's playing poker with Elvis picture. Not worth a whole heck of a lot, right?
Yep.
Somebody walks in the door with a Jackson Pollock that they just found out in the garage that nobody knew was out there.
It was hanging in the garage.
Yeah, it was hanging in the garage. That's right, over the toolbox, right? I thought Dad used this to clean out his paintbrushes after he was done staining the deck. No, that's a Jackson Pollock worth about $28 million. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. Okay, so yes,
that's a little extreme.
That's a little extreme, but it illustrates the point. So yes, so those are things that you would argue if there's no memo that says who gets my Jackson Pollock. In many cases, the default language in the estate documents say something like, my executor would have the decision to make on how this would get handled, and it would go to my residuary clause, and the executor at that point would have to say, look, I cannot, because again, somebody who you've looped in is going to raise their hand and say, hey, time out. The Jackson Pollock is worth $28 million. There's no way that just gets handed over to somebody because you agree, right? That's going to become part of the residuary estate, and that's where all the beneficiaries, it could be one person, could be a bunch of people, would then all share in that equally. And that's one of the things that you do run into this a lot, and you run into it because we're in New England, right? So people will have houses full of what they consider to be antique furniture that may have real value, right? So the way we always describe it is, nobody cares about what happens to your IKEA bookcase, right? But if you have some of this stuff that has real value.
I have some IKEA stuff that's pretty old.
Bill IKEA made it himself, yep. So if you have stuff that has real value, then what's going to happen is it's incumbent on the executor to sort of sit down and say, all right, I need to have somebody come in and give us an appraisal of this stuff. We need to figure out what this stuff is worth. This stuff is not going to pass as just me handing this stuff out. Now, that doesn't mean that people can't say, I'd like to buy that based on fair market value, so everybody's on board. But it all is going to depend on the beneficiaries, the relationship of the beneficiaries, and how that's going to get handled. Yes. But you're right, you make a distinction between stuff that's flat out junk.
Well, I think that could be you could make a case for jewelry, right? You can make a case because there's jewelry that particularly with gold or diamonds that has that value has appreciated substantially over the course of some person's life. What about automobiles? What about cars, right? So it's one thing if I got, a 2009, Nissan Pathfinder. It's another thing if I have a 1959, Chevy,
Just add that, sir.
Chevy
Just add that,
diesel.
sir. These antique
So what'd
cars,
you do?
Antique cars.
Tell me what
Well,
you did.
actually, I'll tell you exactly what we did because we knew. Well, a lot of this, by the way, a lot of this is stuff that gets picked up on the front end.
Well, I was
right?
going to say,
Yeah.
if you have a half decent estate planning team,
Bingo,
right?
exactly, right.
And if you've been down to the Marston Law Center and that's where you do your estate planning, then of course it's academic.
Yeah,
You're not having this problem.
And by the way, and so people do think you're a little nutty when you ask questions like this. Like when somebody says, what's the, you'll ask somebody, I need to have a better sense of what your estate looks like. What are your personal effects like? And you ask those questions. Do you have art? Do you have jewelry? Do you have very specific items that are of value? Antique cars, absolutely. And antique cars are one of those things that, in many cases, people have an antique car, and there might be a very specific bequest that says, and by the way, and to your point, somebody has a car that they use on a regular, everyday basis. That's a car.
There's a
right?
fair market value to that,
That's
right?
a fair market
right.
value. It's a depreciating asset, right? That's the car that's getting beat up by the salt and sits out in the sun all day. For people who have things like toys, right? Call them toys, right? They have an antique car. They might have 2 antique cars. They might have a boat. They might have, things like that. Those things, people are
Dad's
usually...
boat was only 42 feet long.
That's right. I am so sick of polishing the teak. I want no part of this.
So sick of Dad's boat.
But again, somebody has a 1989 center console. It's worth 15 grand, and somebody has some old school antique wooden Chris Craft or whatever you want to call it. Again, those are different stories, right? So you're right. You pick up a lot of that on the front end, and you say to clients, look, if you have specific wishes for where those things go, those will build into your trust because those have real value. The car, if it's just a Honda Accord, nothing against Honda Accords, we're not that worried about the Honda Accord, but yeah, we are worried about antique autos, we are worried about antique boats, we are worried about art, we are worried about jewelry. That's more than just your average, I got a ring.
But you could also make the argument as well. So let's say, for instance, let's say you have 3 siblings, and the 3 siblings are the mom has just passed away or dad has just passed away, and their job is to figure out the personal effects. So if they get along, then of course they'll be able to horse trade and say, look, all right, you get mom's car because you need a car more than than we do, right? Now, mom's may have just bought her car. It may be worth $28,000, right?
Yeah.
So that's significant. Like, okay, here you go. You got the car. And, of course, mom had to write a check for that, so the car's paid for. So that's got some significant value. And then as the executor or as as kind of the overseer of this, you could say, all right, look, well, that's worth $28,000. Let's try and make this as even as we can. Again, taking into consideration, like we talked about earlier, about the sentimental value and the emotional value of something as opposed to just the car. I guess the issue would be, and then you talk about, of course, like the $1 million painting, the 42-foot center console boat that that's an antique that have real value. Those unless you just forgot that you had those, right? Then those would have already hopefully would have already been discussed and identified as to who was going to get that, and that's kind of built into the into the whole general plan of how that estate is getting divvied up.
Yeah, and if there is disagreement, the documentation would say, I leave that to my personal representative on my trustee's discretion to say what's going to happen to those, right? And then the trustee can say, look, my job is to make sure that everything gets balanced out. So if I give you a boat worth $48,000, I might give you a little less money over here to balance everything out, and that's make sure everybody gets what they want to get. And there's some of that going on in terms of just sort of asset redistribution.
But going back to your point before of, so if you're, let's say it's a second marriage, or if there's some combined families and you have an extra number of people that are sitting at this, that have kind of interest in this, and all of a sudden now there's something that wasn't identified that kind of slipped through the cracks.
Sure.
Maybe it's a piece of jewelry, maybe it's a collection of some sort, maybe it's something, maybe like, oh, what about these, all these comic books that Dad, or some type of
all these trading cards. What's this Honus Wagner card worth?
Right, the one, and what is that? What is it? Who wrote on that? Like those kind of things, and then you find those. you mentioned, and I think it would, this is for my own edification. So let's say, so what happens? So it comes to the executor, but then at that point, the executor has to. It's almost like they're like, I'm not equipped to be able to say, okay, this is worth X amount of dollars.
No, so what they would do at that point is they'd say, look, now we have to inventory these things that are of value, right? These types of collectibles, these types of antiques. He said, so we'll go out, we'll get an appraisal, we'll bring somebody in. The usual advice and guidance is you just pay for an appraisal and it ends there, right?
Yeah.
You don't go to the person and say, I need you to appraise these, and then you can tell us how much you're going to pay us for them, right? It's a two-step process. You hire an appraiser to pay you for the time. They come out, they tell you this is what everything's worth. You write them a check and you say, thank you very much. Now you know how much that stuff is worth, and then you figure out from there, okay, now how am I going to distribute this?
Yeah,
right?
and it's no different than like if there was real estate, or if there was something, because like you said, somebody could say, look, I'll buy that. I want that. Like, I want the Honus Wagner card. What's the fair market value of it? $82,000. Here, I'm gonna get my checkbook out.
Yeah.
And then and at that point, then it becomes an issue where, okay, so now we're working this out amongst us. Now, if they want to, if someone says, well, I want the Honus Wagner card, and I want the Honus Wagner card, then, I mean, could you start like a bidding war right there and say?
Well, I think what you try to work it out, because if you don't work it out, then somebody will say, well, we'll just put this in front of somebody in a black robe and let them tell us how to work
exactly
this thing
right.
out, right. So let's try to avoid this if we can. Because then otherwise, it ends up just becoming stuff that the estate picks up, those costs that the estate picks up to get it all taken care of. So that's the challenge. But the idea is that people have stuff that they don't think has a lot of value, and the answer is it's not always about the monetary value. There's an emotional value for some of these items that people are going to take away, and even if it is something that's of an antique nature, remember a lot of this stuff is transferring, at a time when emotions are still really raw, right? And so you may think completely differently about a piece of jewelry or some personal item 6 months, 8 months, 10 months from now than you do on the heels of mom or dad's funeral and wake and the services and the engraving of the headstone and all that stuff that goes along with it, because all those emotions are still raw. And so you see things a lot differently than you do down the road where time has gone by and you say to yourself, because here's your fear. Your fear is this. Your fear is that every time you don't take something that belonged to a loved one of yours, you feel like you're sort of repudiating their memory, right? Yeah. And so your initial instinct you're
letting them down.
Your initial instinct is, let me gather up as much as I can, because this is the only way I'm ever going to remember this person.
And they're going to, right.
And so, and again, that's hard. That's emotional stuff. And that is what can cause, again, forgetting for 1 second that you've got a lifetime of memories that no one can ever take away from you. But guess what? Those are up here, right? Those are memories. In front of me, I have tangible stuff that mom or dad picked. That was mom's rolling pin. Yeah. She made apple pie every Sunday with that rolling pin. And that stuff is the stuff that people are just drawn to for all the right reasons.
That's
for all the reasons that all of us are drawn to that. And in some cases, you have to try to sort of have a discussion with yourself that says, am I really willing to blow all this up over that? Is there a way for us to sort of, swap this thing around? And, maybe the answer is, look, every year for Christmas, somebody has to make mom's apple pie. Yeah. And you get to use mom's rolling pin to do it.
We bring out the pie making kit, right?
That's right. Here you go. And then at the
end, I give it to you, right? Yeah, here you go. You got it next year.
That's exactly. So, there can be some creative ways you can have a lot of fun with this stuff. There could be jewelry that you say, look, you know what? I want my daughter to wear that at her wedding. I want your daughter to wear that at her wedding. So let's figure out how we can do this. And that's what mom would want. Because at the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to. That's what mom would want. That's what dad would want.
Again, unless it's that $28 million painting.
That Jackson Pollock painting.
Or it's that Honus Wagner or the Mickey Mantle baseball glove.
Signed glove,
Then things get a little bit different.
That he actually played in the World Series with, right? It's actually, it's got a bottle opener in it because, Mickey liked his beverages, right? So it's got a bottle opener built into it.
That's the Willie Mays glove that he wore when he made that catch,
basket catch,
The Hall of Fame's been looking for this thing for the past 70 years, right?
Oh, don't laugh. How many times have you seen, right? Let's talk about a real life, right now. How many times have you watched some type of epic struggle, right? Epic baseball battle, right? And some guy launches one into, the home run ball that breaks the thing, and some guy just happens to be right there and catches it. And now, I believe, there's actually, they make arrangements ahead of time.
Oh, yeah.
That say something like, look, if you
catch Derek Jeter's
the
3,000th
record-breaking
hit,
baseball, that's not yours.
Yeah.
That comes right back. And
Yeah.
security is on you like a July stand in Fenway with an open bar behind you, right? They're looking at everybody to see who caught that thing. And that is, they are on you, and they're like, "Thank you very much, Mr. Jeter would love the ball back."
There's some compensation.
They do
for
something for you.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
they do something for you. Yeah, that's right. But again, that becomes something that somebody says, "Look, I want that ball means a lot to me." And somebody turns around and says, "Dad took me to games every Sunday. We talked about Red Sox baseball all the time, and that's really something I want to have." And so, if there's a way to avoid that rock fight, either write it down, give it away while you're alive, but make it clear what you want, because these are the things that can get really contentious.
I think the best part I think you just said it right there. Actually, I would want the rock fight and then figure it out later on, just so we could say we rock fought over that bag or that rolling pin.
The best way it was ever explained to me, and I love this story, the best way it was ever explained to me was somebody was in the house, the kids are all running around, grabbing up loot, right, from mom and dad's house. This is what I want, right? They grab everything, and the attorney who was overseeing the estate says to everybody, "I grab the things that you want. And that's what we're going to do, and then bring everything back into the living room, and everybody sit in their chair." And so that's what they do. And then the attorney
like
says,
Halloween.
"Yep, that's right." And then the attorney says to everybody, "Okay, now take all that stuff that's in front of you and pass it to the person on your right." And everybody's like, "What?" Right? And that's it, right? Grabbed all your loot, turn it over. There you go.
That's
now
right.
everybody's
Move
a little
on
upset.
down the bench.
Everybody's a little upset. That probably means that was the right way to go, right? Everybody's a little mad. And so there, you hear about these stories all the time. And what you don't hear about all the families who work it out.
Yeah.
It's not an issue, right?
No.
They walk in the door, they go, "Look, you take what you want, I take what I want." They flip a coin over a couple of things, and everybody goes home and
you
raises
think
a glass to mom and dad.
And most of the stuff is going away. Most of the stuff is gone. Like most of the stuff they're not going to keep. Like
That's all. Yeah, that's all the stuff that ends up on the front lawn.
There's a fire sale,
estate sale. Come get it. Who wants my curio cabinet? Who wants my table and my lamp?
All that IKEA stuff you were talking that you said wasn't worth anything.
That's right. Right in the fire pit out back. Break that stuff up. Light it up.
I don't think IKEA furniture burns. I don't think it's flame retardant.
I think it's designed to survive nuclear holocaust.
Yeah, that's
right. That's exactly right.
Because that's the first place it's happened is in Sweden.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's we're known for antagonizing all of the world. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. You mess with me? Try it. Yeah.
Take this. I give
Send
you,
it.
Yeah. Here's a bookcase. Yeah, try it.
Try and light this bookcase on fire. All right, we're out of time.
All right, we're gonna run. Good talk, everybody. Appreciate it. And if you have any questions, as always, email the show. We'd love to hear from you.
Moneyinthelaw.net. That's the website. There's going to be some new video that's going to be up. So that courtesy of Hollis and Cable Access, we're going to upload. We're going to actually move down the Halloweens, which is always good. But we're going to move that down the bench a little bit, bring up some of the newer stuff. So
maybe there'll be a Valentine's show.
Maybe there'll be coming up. That's
we'll
right.
See.
Coming up. All
right.
right.
We'll do a St. Patrick's Day show.
Actually,
do the whole thing in a brogue.
Actually, guess what? So that's next week, right? So next week, guess who I'm going to see? I'll tease you with this. Guess who I'm going to see on Wednesday night of next week?
Michael Bublé.
No, not Bublé. No, better.
Whoa.
Yep.
I don't know. Who?
80s throwback. Joe Jackson.
Ooh,
Joe Jackson playing at the Wang.
Is she really going out with him?
Is she really? That's right.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes, great song.
I will be at Joe Jackson next week.
That is old school right
there. That's right.
All
right. We'll see everybody next week.
Joe for me.
I will. All right. We'll see everybody next week on Money in the Law. Jay Mars and John Drohan, Hollis and Cable Access TV. Thank you for being here. We'll see you
Have a great week.
Saturday.